All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a word that, well, it can make people a little uncomfortable: dogma. But is it really just about blind faith, or is there something much, much deeper going on? Let's get into it. So, when you hear the word dogma, what pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's this idea of rigid, inflexible rules that you're not allowed to question. But in its theological context, the word has a super specific and important meaning. And it's really not about blind belief at all. What's pretty wild is where the word came from. Its Greek root just meant opinion, or that which seems good. Kind of casual, right? But over time, it took on this very specific theological weight, a truth that is believed to come directly from God and is then formally spelled out by the church. So, how in the world do we get from a simple opinion to a core belief of a global faith? Well, here's our game plan for today. We're going to look at what Christian dogma is and where it comes from. Then we'll check out the roles of faith and reason. After that, we'll dive into two massive examples, the Trinity and the nature of Christ, before we ask the biggest question of all: what's the whole point? Okay, let's start at the very beginning. If dogma is a defined truth, where do these big ideas actually come from? What's the ultimate source? So the starting point for all dogma is understood to be God revealing himself. And this isn't just a one-time thing. It's something that's preserved and handed down through what's known as tradition. Think of it like a living stream. And tradition isn't just one single thing. It's more like a container that holds and protects dogma. Right at the very heart of it, the nucleus is the Holy Bible, but it also includes all this other stuff that has shaped belief over thousands of years. Stuff like oral histories, the words used in worship, and of course, the foundational writings of the early church leaders. It's a really rich, complex tapestry of belief in action. Okay, so if revelation is the source and it's held within this big container called tradition, how are these truths actually understood and processed? This is where two of our key human abilities come into play, and they work together: faith and reason. Now, faith isn't presented as just a blind leap in the dark. It's seen as a full, personal response to God, an actual encounter. Reason, on the other hand, is the tool we use to explore, to understand, and to interpret what's been revealed through that faith. So they're not enemies. They're really seen as two sides of the same coin in this whole quest for understanding. Now, to see how reason gets applied to revelation, let's look at a really classic example from a 13th century theologian named Thomas Aquinas. He came up with what are famously called the 5 ways, 5 arguments for God's existence that don't start with the Bible, but with things we can observe in the world around us. Each one of these ways starts with something we can all see, like motion or cause and effect, or just the incredible order of the universe. And then it uses logic to trace that observation all the way back to a first principle, an ultimate source. This is a perfect example of how reason gets used in theology, not to replace faith, but to explore its foundations and build a bridge between the world we can see and divine mystery. Okay, so now let's see how these tools of faith and reason helped build what is maybe the central dogma of the Christian faith: the nature of God as the Holy Trinity. I mean, this is one of the most complex and foundational ideas, and it seriously took centuries of debate to figure out how to even talk about it. You have to imagine these early thinkers like Gregory of Nazianzus here, just wrestling with how to put an indescribable mystery into human words. In this quote, he's being so careful, describing the Father as the ground of unity, the source from which the other persons are understood. All that wrestling with language eventually led to this core definition, and it uses 2 super specific Greek words to make a really important distinction: ousia, which means substance or essence, and hypostases, which means persons. And here's where that distinction makes all the difference. The doctrine says there's one what, that single divine substance, the ousia, and 3 whos, the distinct persons, or hypostases, of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's a really precise philosophical way of saying God is one in essence, but 3 in personhood. So from the nature of God as a Trinity, we now zoom in on the second person of that Trinity, Jesus Christ. This whole field is called Christology, and it's all about a dogma that became incarnate or embodied. The biggest challenge of Christology is to explore this core belief, that the historical person, Jesus of Nazareth, who walked the earth, is the exact same person as the divine Christ. It's all about grappling with that huge question: How can one person be both 100% human and 100% divine?
And this is just a brilliant way to illustrate those two natures. You have the title Son of Man, which Jesus often used for himself. That points to his humanity and his earthly mission. But then you have Son of God, which points to his divinity and his unique relationship with the Father. Both are seen as absolutely essential to understanding who he is.
Which brings us to our last section. So we've looked at what dogma is, where it comes from, and some really big examples. But what's the ultimate point of all this careful definition and doctrine? I mean, why does it actually matter to a believer? And this right here is the crucial insight. Dogma isn't meant to be just an intellectual workout or a bunch of facts you memorize for a test. In this framework, learning theology has a much deeper, more transformative purpose. So understanding dogma is presented as just the first step on a bigger spiritual journey. It's the foundation that leads to what's called living theology. Applying these truths in your daily life through worship and prayer, which then leads to this process of spiritual growth. And that ultimate goal, that whole process of spiritual growth, it has a name: theosis, or divinization. It's described as the lifelong journey of a person becoming, through grace, more and more like God. Dogma, in this view, is the essential map for that journey toward transformation. So this whole understanding of dogma leaves us with a final thought that really goes beyond any one belief system. It doesn't matter what we call them: dogmas, first principles, core values, the foundational beliefs that we hold. They are incredibly powerful. They don't just shape what we think about the world. Ultimately, they shape who we become within it.